Latina y el Caribe hacia un futuro sostenible y resiliente. De acuerdo con el informe 2020 de la Organización Mundial de Meteorología, la sequía generalizada en América Latina y el Caribe ha tenido un impacto considerable en el rendimiento de los cultivos y en la producción de alimentos. Adaptarnos a los efectos del cambio climático implica repensar cómo hacemos algunas cosas, y existen diversas experiencias regionales que permiten una adaptación y mitigación ante el cambio climático en el sector agropecuario, que no afectan la productividad ni la rentabilidad y que, por el contrario, en muchos casos, expanden las oportunidades de desarrollo económico y social. Reconectarnos con la naturaleza en beneficio de esta, pero también de los agricultores y las comunidades. De la mano de la ciencia, tecnología e innovación, podemos realizar acciones que promuevan la resiliencia de nuestros ecosistemas. Debemos reunirnos, tanto el sector público como privado, la academia y las ONGs, instituciones financieras donantes y las instituciones del Sistema de las Naciones Unidas, para recopilar y compartir conocimientos, capacitar a comunidades y productores y trabajar por cambios a gran escala. Por esto, hacemos un llamado abierto a los países y gobiernos de América Latina y el Caribe, con el objetivo de promover y potenciar la colaboración entre países para apoyar estrategias regionales y nacionales relacionadas a los impactos del cambio climático y la variabilidad climática en el sector agropecuario, considerando las dimensiones social, ambiental y económica. Únete a Placa, un nuevo mecanismo regional de adhesión voluntaria integrada por los Ministerios de Agricultura de los países de América Latina y el Caribe, instituciones colaboradoras y la Secretaría que reside en FAO y CEPAL. Placa, Plataforma de Acción Climática en Agricultura de Latinoamérica y el Caribe. Restaurar. Repensar. Reconectar. Resiliencia. Reunión. Sabemos que tenemos la misión de restaurar los ecosistemas para encaminar el planeta, y particularmente a América Latina y el Caribe, hacia un futuro sostenible y resiliente. De acuerdo con el informe 2020 de la Organización Mundial de Meteorología, la sequía generalizada en América Latina y el Caribe ha tenido un impacto considerable en el rendimiento de los cultivos y en la producción de alimentos. Adaptarnos a los efectos del cambio climático implica repensar cómo hacemos algunas cosas, y existen diversas experiencias regionales que permiten una adaptación y mitigación ante el cambio climático en el sector agropecuario, que no afectan la productividad ni la rentabilidad y que, por el contrario, en muchos casos, expanden las oportunidades de desarrollo económico y social. Reconectarnos con la naturaleza en beneficio de esta, pero también de los agricultores y las comunidades. De la mano de la ciencia, tecnología e innovación, podemos realizar acciones que promuevan la resiliencia de nuestros ecosistemas. Debemos reunirnos, tanto el sector público como privado, la academia y las ONGs, instituciones financieras donantes y las instituciones del sistema de las Naciones Unidas, para recopilar y compartir conocimientos, capacitar a comunidades y productores y trabajar por cambios a gran escala. Por esto, hacemos un llamado abierto a los países y gobiernos de América Latina y el Caribe, con el objetivo de promover y potenciar la colaboración entre países para apoyar estrategias regionales y nacionales relacionadas a los impactos del cambio climático y la variabilidad climática en el sector agropecuario, considerando las dimensiones social, ambiental y económica. Únete a Placa, un nuevo mecanismo regional de adhesión voluntaria integrada por los Ministerios de Agricultura de los países de América Latina y el Caribe, instituciones colaboradoras y la Secretaría que reside en FAO y CEPAL. Placa, Plataforma de Acción Climática en Agricultura de Latinoamérica y el Caribe.
Buenos días, es un gusto darles la bienvenida al evento Diálogo Regional,
Event, regional dialogue, cooperation and opportunities to strengthen climate action in the farming sector of Latin America and the Caribbean. The objective of this dialogue is to promote the exchange of experiences from the mechanisms of cooperation existing in the region and to have an impact over the inter-sector integration between environment and farming. This as the preamble to the 27th COP of the Framework Agreement of the UN on Climate Change, COP27. This dialogue takes place within the framework of FAO China response and recovery to the impact of COVID-19 in rural environments and food systems in the countries of the community.
CELAC. A través
The
de la
community of Latin American and Caribbean countries, CELAC, through the cooperation. And in this meeting, we will get to know more about the platform for climate change in the farming in Latin America and the Caribbean, Placa, which is a regional cooperation mechanism that provides support to strengthen national and regional strategies in relation to climate action in farming. And also, we will hear more about the experiences of the Global Alliance of the Global Soil Partnership of Latin America and the Caribbean in order to facilitate the exchange of knowledge and the strengthening of capabilities related to the information, training, investment, and also environmental challenges that the countries in the region are facing. Likewise, we will gather the perspective of other regional organizations related to climate action. Also, we will hear from national experiences on the articulation between the sectors of environment and agriculture, more specifically the Chilean case. Be welcome, everyone. And my name is Ana Poza. I'm the officer of farming from the regional FAO office for Latin America and the Caribbean, and I will be moderating today's event. Initially, I would like to start especially welcoming Mr. Mario Ludberking, Deputy Director and Representative of FAO for Latin America and the Caribbean. Likewise, I would like to give the welcome to Maisa Rojas, Minister of the Environment of Chile, Mr. Jair Urriola, Executive Secretary of the Central American Commission on Environment and Development, Mr. Julian Baez, Director of the Regional Office of the World Meteorological Organization.
Carla Mena, Directora Nacional de Extensión
Mrs. Carla Mena, Director of the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock of Costa Rica and also Chairperson of Placa, and Ms. Sol Ortiz, General Director of Policies and Climate Change from the Secretariat of Agriculture and Development of the Government of Mexico, and Chairwoman of ASLA. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Thank you for joining us today. Be welcome, everyone, to this dialogue. And I'd like to remind you, first of all, that we are broadcasting this event with simultaneous translation to English. You can access the event through the FAO's YouTube channel, also through the website of FAO, www.fao.org/Americas, and also from our tweet account. We want to invite you to talk about the event using the hashtags Together for Implementation and also with the hashtag Climate Action. Also, we would like to invite all the attendees to ask your questions through the chat box in our social media that we will try to respond throughout the Q&A session that has been planned for this event, and we kindly suggest that you indicate your name, your question, and also the name of the person that your question is addressed to. To start with the dialogue, we are going to show you a video with the remarks of the Deputy Director and representative of FAO for Latin America and the Caribbean with the first reflections, comments, and action lines to strengthen climate action in the agriculture in Latin America and the Caribbean. Let's continue on with the video.
Buenos días. Quisiera saludar muy especialmente a las altas autoridades que nos acompañan en este diálogo. Los gobiernos, sector privado, academia, centros de investigación y a todas y todos los asistentes que nos están siguiendo de una u otra manera. Estamos aquí para explorar en conjunto experiencias y caminos para fortalecer la acción climática en la agricultura de América Latina y el Caribe. La región sigue enfrentando importantes amenazas y desafíos en materia climática y medio ambiente. La escasez de agua, la sequía, la degradación de los suelos, la pérdida de la biodiversidad,
The
la
degradation of the soil, the loss of biodiversity, deforestation, as well as other natural disasters have become part of the natural situation, which is very, very serious. It has been shown in the different reports of the sixth assessment report from the governmental panel of experts on climate change and the different reports on climate in 2021 from the Meteorological Organization of the World. And this is a situation that heavily impacts agricultural and food systems and the ability of smaller farmers of maintaining their livelihood and their very important role as producers of the food of the world that we need so much. We urgently need to strengthen climate action to face the impacts of climate change in the agricultural and food systems that are under threat and that are compromising livelihood, biodiversity, and the supply of goods and services that are basic to the ecosystem, as well as strengthening any measures that make a contribution towards mitigating climate change. In this situation, women, young people, smaller farmers, indigenous peoples are among the most vulnerable population to the impact of climate change, and at the same time, they have a key role to play in progressing towards adapting to climate change and mitigating climate change. Innovation promoted by data, science, policies, and investment are also key in order to shift towards agricultural and food systems that are resilient. In the region, we have been working with plenty of energy in many initiatives at the country level, as well as through regional mechanisms aiming at the same purpose. An example of that is the project of livestock in Uruguay that has allowed us to increase the net income in almost 300%, decreasing in some cases up to 16% of the CO2 emissions per kilogram of beef produced. This is a sustainable management project, as well as other projects that have been put in place in Brazil and Trinidad and Tobago that have allowed it to decrease unintentional fishing thanks to new fish nets and technologies. There are new techniques that would allow banana producers in Colombia to decrease in 15% their losses due to climate change and in 25% the use of fertilizers per hectare. And without even mentioning other initiatives, for instance, the recarbonization of soil in Costa Rica and the preservation of biodiversity and mitigation of climate change, with the gender approach with the indigenous communities in the wild reservations in Venezuela are nothing but more examples of the work that is being conducted. With the integration system, we're working with the Council of Agriculture and Livestock, supporting all the efforts, intersectorial efforts in 8 countries within the framework of the Apollo 2040 initiative. And all this effort is conducted locally, but also globally. The work and the coordination intersectorially at the regional level, the partnerships, the alliances, the South-South cooperation can support the co-creation of solutions facing the challenges of climate change, which is why we're happy to see that instances like the Platform for Climate Action of Latin America and the Caribbean, the Global Soil Partnership, as well as other instances of which Chile is part, are part of this dialogue that invite us to think and to critically reflect upon these issues. In a few days, the COP27 will take place in Egypt with the approach of reaching important goals for farming. It is a key instance because it was a COP when, with the support of FAO, Placa was launched, which is now comprised by 13 countries with a secretariat which is also involving FAO. And we are conducting this event in the framework of FAO China South-South cooperation to mitigate and to promote recovery before or after COVID-19 in the countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. Therefore, I would like to wish you success in this event, and I confirm the willingness of FAO to work actively in this with a sense of urgency, looking for new and important breakthroughs. We have no time to waste. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias a usted, señor Mario.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mario, for giving us the first initial comments on the approach that the FAO sees in order to strengthen climate change in the agriculture activity in our region to support the member states. Now, we would like to invite Mrs. Carla Mesa, National Director of Agricultural Activities in Costa Rica, who will tackle the work that has been conducted by the Climate Action Platform in Agriculture in Latin America and the Caribbean, Placa. Mrs. Mesa, please, you have 7 minutes, and the floor is yours.
¿Me escuchan? Hola.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Yes.
Perfecto, solo si la pone en modo presentación, perfecto.
Listo.
Muchas gracias.
Muy buenos días y muchas gracias.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me. Thank you for this great opportunity that has been given to the Placa platform, which has been highlighted for its duty as a voluntary basis regional mechanism to respond to the needs of the agricultural ministries in Latin America and the Caribbean. I would like to mention, first of all, that Placa is the platform of climate change regarding agriculture in Latin America and the Caribbean, and it is on voluntary basis to respond to the needs of the agricultural sector in terms of mitigation and adaptation to climate change in the countries in Latin America. And it was started by the COP25 that was led by the Ministry of Agriculture, of Chile, and several ministries became a part back then. And the main objective of this platform is to promote and to foster collaboration between countries. How? With initiatives, with multi-stakeholder platforms, with partnerships, with institutions to put in place mitigation actions that our countries are committed to put in place in order to promote this challenge of decreasing our emissions and also adapting ourselves to climate change, more specifically in such a vulnerable sector, which is our agricultural and livestock sector, supporting regional strategies that we know that have been put in place for some time now, national strategies as well in relation to climate change, weather variability in the agricultural and livestock sector, and of course considering the social, environmental, and economic dimensions. Let's not forget that mostly we have smaller producers in our systems, and we need to have an interaction with the decision makers all the way from the political to the technical levels to put in place climate actions in the territories. Placa is structured with a chairmanship and a co-chair that today I am the chair through the Ministry of Climate Change and through the Ministry of Agriculture. And then we have Mrs. Sol Ortiz, and the idea would be to promote the operations throughout a year. We have a specific work plan, we have our council, we have our focal points, and we are organized in different work groups, as you can see listed on the screen. And this is very important for the development of these actions that have been agreed upon, organized in an action plan regarding adaptation and mitigation, public policies, transfer of knowledge and good practices, and research development and technological innovation. And it's important to highlight that this structure of management is something that we've been developing thanks to the support of the Secretariat that we have from FAO and ICLAC to this platform. At this moment, the platform has 13 member states that you can see listed here: Argentina, Bahamas, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Haiti, Panama, Peru, Mexico, the Dominican Republic, and Uruguay. And it has been key to have the support of 6 other partners in order to put in place the different tasks, actions, and activities that we have been putting forth in this short time, and that have given plenty of support to our agricultural ministries. We have a work plan that has 4 major pillars that, of course, are the strengthening of capabilities with workshops, with online training. Also, we have dialogue for public policies where we want to promote collaboration. We want to know more about what we're doing. We need to have a roadmap and support ourselves to reach consensus in the region. We know that this is a highly diverse region. Therefore, in public policies, it's important to get to know more and to be aligned and to support the different initiatives. Communication is also very important in our action plan in order to put in place the communication strategy. What we're doing is participating in different events. Of course, the COP27, which is coming soon, will not be the exception. We will be involved, and we want to put Placa and our region at the forefront of the climate action, and we want to strengthen the capabilities in our technical staff and, of course, support the political decisions in our ministries. Also, a very important pillar has been regional coordination, by which we are promoting the development of regional projects in issues, for instance, fighting the drought. We also have general assemblies, and we interact with other specific stakeholders and regional mechanisms to join all the efforts that we need at the technical level in our region. The working groups, as you can see in the presentation, are led and coordinated with a specific plan that comprises different tasks and actions with colleagues from different countries, as you can see listed on the screen. At this point, I would like to highlight that these are working groups that are aiming at creating regional networks of collaboration among the countries that are part of Placa. Each of the groups has a specific objective, of course, framed within the work of Placa, and from the moment they were created, they have become a privileged instance to share experiences, lessons learned, and to address different topics proposed by the different countries, responding to the needs of our ministries of agriculture, as well as other issues related to the agricultural, forestry, and livestock sector and climate change, becoming this into a hands-on community where there is work based on collaboration, there is planning, there are tasks that have been very important in the 2 years of work of Placa. And I'd like to give you a sample of what the work of Placa has been throughout the last year, where we have had different activities, we have had webinars, dialogues, different events, we have put in place projects, we have created technical assistance events, which is very important to take our actions to the public policies. We have had hybrid events, online events in the framework of reinforce transparency for the countries of Placa. We are working on national inventories. We're working on the methodologies that we are applying, and we're getting to know each other to strengthen the use of the tools. We are conducting also methodological workshops to calculate emissions, workshops with experts, and also we are inviting the countries to share low-cost technological solutions. We have done training for rural interventions, and other training resources will be available in our platform. And this is one of the latest training courses. This was an activity that was key, and it was an initiative proposed by one of the working groups that I showed earlier, and it was about getting to know good practices. 16 countries in the region participated, where many institutions and many people were inspired to support the proposals that were assessed by a committee that was unbiased in order to assess all the actions that Placa has been promoting with this activity, which was the first one of its kind, and it was actually quite a milestone in our history as Placa. In summary, I would like to say that during the last 2 years that have been suffering the pandemic, we have strengthened the work of the 4 working groups that have been created online, which is an example of using technologies in spite of the difficulties. We've been able to consolidate the mechanisms, and we've been able to strengthen and update and renew the technical abilities in the different ministries, and we have been setting our priorities, like the workshops that I mentioned earlier, and the needs that many of our colleagues have in the different countries. Placa has managed to establish a hands-on community in this instance of collaboration and added value, focusing on key issues to promote networks, to promote the exchange of knowledge, to promote a dialogue with the public policies in relation to the agricultural and livestock and forestry sector. To finalize, I would like to invite those countries that are not yet part of Placa to please become a member of the platform. We believe that Placa can definitely make a contribution towards better understanding and generating alternatives of production, promoting technology and innovation to actually make a contribution towards the resilience in our territories that are highly diverse in Latin America and the Caribbean, and of course, without affecting the competitiveness of this sector and giving added value to whom? To that farmer who is everywhere in our agricultural territories in such a way that we grow stronger as a region to show the potential that this agricultural platform has, which has had the mission of connecting professionals of different ministries, and in this manner we will be able to identify common needs, strengths, weaknesses, to articulate processes, to reinforce capabilities, and of course, to adapt and mitigate to climate change, because we know that there are many ongoing projects that we want our ministries of agriculture to support and to see us as their partner in this mechanism. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mrs. Mena. Without a doubt, the work of Placa needs to be paid close attention to because it responds to the request of the Ministries of Agriculture of the region of having a regional voluntary mechanism for climate change, and that also promotes coordination and synergy between the agricultural development, climate change, and food security. Also, I would like to take this opportunity to invite the other countries to become members of Placa, just like Argentina, Bahamas, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Haiti, Mexico, Panama, Peru, Uruguay, and the Dominican Republic. Thank you so much.
A continuación, los invitamos a escuchar el trabajo que viene.
Now, we would like to give the floor to the Minister of Chile to hear about the work of the intersectorial articulation between environment and agriculture. And for that, I'm going to give the floor to the Minister of Agriculture of Chile, Mrs. Maisa Rojas. Thank you, Minister, for joining us today in this dialogue. You have 7 minutes. The floor is yours. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I'm not the Minister of Agriculture, I am the Minister of the Environment. Thank you for that. I'm sorry, apologies. Yes, so I will talk about this intersectorial articulation from the perspective of the Ministry of Environment. In the case of Chile, up until 2010, we had a National Environment Commission that was called CONAMA. This was an institution that had the role of coordination, and it was deployed, for instance, in moments when the National Biodiversity Strategy was put in place, with the participation of many public services, among those the Ministry of Agriculture and several services that are under the responsibility of the ministry, for instance, the National Forestry Corporation and also the Agriculture and Livestock Service. In 2010, there was a major reform in the country by which the Ministry of Environment was created with a law that was put in place, and it was assigned a larger number of authorities, instruments, in order to conduct the environmental management in the region. Even though the ministry was created in 2010, and this is relevant for today's conversation, there is still a missing pillar in the environmental institutionality, because at that point, there wasn't a service of protected areas or biodiversity created. This is a service which is still being discussed in the House of Representatives, and we hope that it finally is successful in the following months. That service will have a number of instruments and will better organize the work, not only regarding protected areas, but also to protect biodiversity. And it will be an instrument within and out of the institutional protected areas. And in that framework, we are going to be working together with the Ministry of Agriculture. And what's interesting here is that regardless of the fact that that service doesn't exist yet, from the moment CONAMA was created, there has been a culture of intersectorial coordination at different levels. And I would like to give you some examples of that. For instance, the Ministry of Agriculture was the first ministry that developed an adaptation plan to climate change of the agricultural and forestry sector. It was developed in 2013 and at this moment is being updated. And this is very important because being the first of the plans, there have been very important learnings that we have had thanks to that. So first of all, the principles were that the climate change adaptation needed to be part of the management of the Ministry of Agriculture, and that adaptation to climate change and the forestry sector needed to be updated and modernized, and also that climate change adaptation in the agricultural and forestry sector needed to happen in line with strategies of the ministry. And it cannot be a plan that doesn't have strategic guidelines. Another example that we've worked on together is the climate strategy, and this is a strategy of CONAF, Ministry of Agriculture, but that the Ministry of Environment is a part of as well. Lastly, a third example is the approval of the current National Strategy on Biodiversity, which is the strategy of the Ministry of Environment, but also with the participation of the Ministry of Agriculture. In Chile, we have the Council of Ministers for Sustainability and Climate Change, in which a number of strategies are approved, and also the Ministry of Agriculture is part of that. So the three examples come to show that the coordination between both ministries is highly active and that works through a set of technical committees as well as management instruments like the ones I mentioned earlier. Another example is the coordinated creation of the NDCs, nationally determined contribution towards the framework agreement on climate change. And this is a very important pillar which is under the responsibility of the Ministry of Agriculture in relation to capturing the emissions and collecting the information within a pillar that we have called nature-based solutions, which is included in the Chilean NDCs. Another example of a policy is the current joint creation of the National Plan of Landscape Restoration with the participation of both ministries, where we are part of the advisory committee. This coordination that has taken place along the years and that we have many examples of is now reinforced with a legal framework that exists in the country, and it is the recently published framework law on climate change, which is enacted since 2010, and it has the purpose of creating resilience and also carbon neutrality by 2050. So this isn't only a coordination between the Ministry of Environment and Agriculture, but also this is a law that 17 ministries have signed. So there is a challenge for coordination throughout the state overall. Within the law, for instance, we have moving forward in nature-based solutions as well as other plans that I have mentioned earlier. And what the law allows for is that beyond having a good relationship between the ministries at the technical and political level, it gives a binding feature to the coordination in such a way that the ministries will have to report not only to the Ministry of Environment regarding the progress that has been made, but also before the National Senate and also before the Controller's Office. Does the work that is conducted in terms of monitoring, verification, and reporting of the progress that are done in climate action in Chile, including those associated to the agricultural sector, will have to be formalized, and there will be a follow-up legally enforced by several other entities of the state. In summary, I would like to highlight three aspects of the relationship between the Ministry of Environment and Agriculture. First, the importance of coordination at all levels to face shared challenges, mainly in terms of the management of biodiversity and climate change, understanding that this is a work that is not under the responsibility of just one sector, but it is a cross-sectional responsibility. Secondly, we need to mobilize intersectorial coordination from the creation of policies, strategies, and actions of intervention with international funding. Many of these strategies have had actually international financing, and it allows us to have concrete tools that channel the political willingness to work on these issues. And thirdly, today we have greater tools, for instance, the framework law on climate change, and also we have socio-ecological challenges that require further expanding our capabilities to provide a response and to continue on in the journey of climate action and also fighting the loss of biodiversity. Thank you.
Muy relevante, señora ministra de Medio Ambiente, sus puntos.
That was very relevant. Thank you very much for your efforts
en esta materia
and share the efforts that Chile is making in this aspect. For us and for everybody who is participating in this kind of actions, it's really fundamental to advance towards a culture that is more resilient and inclusive. And this is going to aim to an integration that is going to have biodiversity and that broadens the services, the ecosystemic services, and that it reduces greenhouse gases and adapts to the impacts of climate change, and also prevents and manages the risks of disaster. Thank you very much for your participation again. So continuing with the program, I would like to present Mr. Julian Baez. He's a director of the National Office of OMM for the Americas, who will address the current results of the publication, The State of Climate in Latin America in 2021, that will talk about the climate aspect of the region. Thank you very much. Mr. Baez, you have 7 minutes. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to give this presentation. I am going to share my screen, if possible. I hope you can see my presentation. If you could put it in presentation mode, please. There it is.
Perfecto, muchas gracias.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I will not talk about the organization part, and I am going to go directly to what you mentioned, which is the presentation of the state of climate in Latin America and the Caribbean for 2021. That was presented this year in July, where several organizations participated in the evaluation of this. Fundamentally, we had the participation of 55 experts from the region and around the world. We also had the participation of 19 international and regional institutions, 29 national meteorological and hydrological services, And very important to highlight that we also had 10 United Nations agencies directly involved, including the FAO, the ECLAC, and others that have participated in the evaluation.
En términos muy generales dentro de este
In
tiempo,
very general terms, in this time, I would like to say that the temperature in this region has continuing to go down, to go up. Is the 7th year in a row that we have seen an increase in temperature. You can see that clearly in this graphics.
0.2 grados centígrados.
This has been increasing in about 0.2 degrees Celsius in all Latin America. Now, if we start seeing by sub-region, we can also realize that all of the sub-regions are divided into Mexico, the Caribbean, Central America, and South America. And in all of the sub-regions, we have seen an important increase in temperatures in 2021 related to the historic temperature that we saw from 1981 to 2010. In terms of precipitation, we have the same situation. We can see big contrasts sub-regionally. And in South America, we have two extremes: the north of South America with an excess of precipitation, mainly in the north and the center, and from the center to the south. In Chile, we have had especially a big drought, the third year in a row with drought. In the Caribbean and in Mexico, we also see excess of precipitation. Another aspect that we need to consider are the glaciers. They have had a reduction that has been consecutive in the tropical Andes in this period from 1990 and 2020. In the subregions of the Andes, we have seen a reduction of the glaciers. Another aspect that is very important to consider is the heavy precipitation and the extremes in climate. We are seeing that there is an important increase of these extremes. We've seen, as I mentioned, rains that have been very important in Costa Rica, mainly in Central America, in Haiti also, and in other regions of South America. We also see floods in Brazil. And on the other hand, we have droughts that are very significant. In the Paraná, La Plata Basin, mainly, and the mega drought in the central zone of Chile, that according to the report that we have had, we have seen drought for about 10 consecutive years. We're also having heat waves and also wildfires that they were mainly produced in the region of El Pantanal in Brazil, and also in the zone of the Amazonian. We have seen this in a very significant way in the year 2021. So I wanted to mention that this year, along with the National Agency for Disasters Warning, we have seen a status about the multi-hazard early warning systems as a concrete action related to the climate action for the countries in the world. And we have seen, based on surveys, fundamentally about the meteorological services of the world, that this is the distribution. The blue color, that the countries have a minimum early warning system. And in the Americas, in South America mainly, apparently this situation and these systems are good. We have an 8% of deficit, and we have a lack of response of an 8% too.
en donde la mitad de los países no cuentan con un sistema de alerta temprana.
Half of the countries of the world do not have a system. So that's what I wanted to tell you. Thank you very much.
Gracias a usted, señor Baez. Sin lugar a dudas, la información detallada.
Thank you very
sobre
much. We had a detailed information about climate change and the extreme meteorological phenomenon from the Amazon to the Andes and also to the snow summits. We need to take all of this into consideration to make decisions. Thank you very much.
por la información brindada. Ahora
And
invitamos a la
now I will invite Mrs. Sol Ortiz. She's a General Director of Policies, Prospection, and Climate Change from the National Secretariat of Agriculture and Development from the Mexican government and President of ASLAC.
por favor.
Muchas gracias. Muy buenos días tengan todos ustedes. Nuevamente, muchas
Thank you very
gracias.
much. Good morning. Have a great
¿Qué es la alianza?
I hope you have a great day up to now, and I am going to tell you about the alliance, the Global Alliance for the Soil.
Mundial por el Suelo?
This is related to a mechanism that it was developed in the national, the FAO, to have an association that is very solid and with a lot of collaboration amongst all of the parts, the stakeholders, and that are related to the soil.
Es mejorar la
What we
gobernanza.
want to do is to improve the governance of the soil, to have a sustainable management, and to put the soils in the global agenda.
Tiene 7 alianzas.
The Global Soil Partnership has 7 regional alliances with more than 370 partners. We work in
Designados
160 focal points that are designated directly by the members of the FAO, and they are solid networks amongst the different players that are relevant in soil. And I think that this is a strength that is very important in the Global Soil Partnership. We also have, apart from the regional alliances, we have thematic groups and work groups. This Global Soil Partnership, apart from the partners, we include the Intergovernmental Technical Panel about Soil, Secretariat, that is led by the FAO, and the secretariat here is Mr. Ronald Vargas. We also have the regional partnerships, and we work in a very participative system with the plenary assemblies. We have these 7 networks, technical networks, that I am not going to name them all, but I hope that you can go into the webpage of the Global Soil Partnership. This is one of the 7 alliances that the Global Soil Partnership has, and its objective is to exchange partnership and strengthening capabilities, and also exchanging information, looking for mechanisms for investment, and also look at the challenges that the countries have in the soil aspects. This is what the ASLAC does. So who is part of the ASLAC? I have the honor of chairing the ASLAC currently, and there are 3 vice presidents according to the different regions. This Chile is represented by Rodrigo Osorio, Panama by Jose Villarreal, and also from the Vice Rectory of the Caribbean, we have Trinidad and Tobago with Gaius Exodai. We have representatives that also represent us with different projects, for example, the Sustainable Management of Soil, the Latin American Network of Laboratories, Education for Soils, and Data and Information of Soils. These are different players that are also part of the alliance. There are different actions that are agreed upon in the regional alliances and in the plenary alliance of the Global Partnership. And in here we have seminars, elaboration of technical documents with the participation of the Intergovernmental Panel, regional projects, maps of soils. So for example, we have been advancing a lot in black soils of the potential carbon capture maps and salinity maps. We also are fostering different maps for the dissemination of the importance of soil. I am going to be talking about these activities. And for example, I have here the network of the soil. We have the Latin American soil laboratory network. This is part of this global soil laboratory network. And it also adds to the different work that the countries do through their own network of labs. So in the case of the LAT-SOLAN, we have about 206 laboratories of soils in 23 countries of the region. We have been looking for the participation of all of the countries in the region. There are 93 agents of labs, and we have been participating in the different Latin American networks. So we have started working with 2 new networks at a laboratory level. We're talking about the laboratories of Chile and Mexico, and there are several laboratories in here that participate in the organization of the labs. The other program that I would like to highlight is the program of soil doctors. This is a program that includes a series of trainings of producers so that they at the same time can scale in the training with other producers. This is done in the Global Soil Partnership. They have one promoter in each one of the countries that start a training program for each one of the trainers, for each one of the soil doctors. And we get to the producers that are the ones that are going to be certified as the soil doctors. So the advancement of this program is in particular working in Bolivia and Mexico, and it's going to start, maybe they already started in Colombia, Chile, Ecuador, and Nicaragua. In the case of Mexico, which is the case that I know the best, we have 300 agricultures that are already trained. We have certified 104, and we have 79 doctors of soils. 25 are sponsors. So another example is the communication that we have and the dissemination that we have in the the World Soil Day. And this organization organized 130 events. This is the day in which we are celebrating the importance of the soil, the 5th of December every year. We're going to celebrate it this year too. And we have the participation not only from the governments, but also academics, organizations of producers, civil society, companies, private sector. And in this case, last year, Mexico and Brazil were in the first 5 places in terms of quantity and quality of events that we had in the region. And we also had high rates of recognition in terms of the social media. In the assembly, we have identified different soils, different challenges that we need to work in the Latin American partnership. We need to boost the regional partnerships and have a better link with the ministries of agriculture in the region. But as we were seeing just now, not only with agriculture, but also with other sectors. And we need to try to strengthen the research programs of sustainable management of soils, and also link in a better way with the societies that are going to be working with science of soil in our regions. We have different opportunities, and we have identified priorities in the region. To finish, I would like to share with you that in Mexico, we have developed as a policies tool, which is the National Strategy for Soils for Sustainable Agriculture, that is going to take many of the elements that we work on in what is related to the the Global Soil Partnership. I really like this graph because this is shared by the colleagues of the Alliance, and you can see all of the elements that contribute to the soil and the objectives of sustainable development for the Agenda 2030, yes, and this is very related to soils. And all of the actions that we can take for the climate is very relevant, and for that we need a lot of collaboration and coordination. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much, Mrs. Ortiz. The articulation achieved by the Alliance is fundamental for the health of the soils in our planet and our region, mainly if we remember that soils that are managed sustainably and with a lot of organic preparation, nutrients, and humidity can produce up to 50% more of food. So we want to remind you that we are broadcasting this event in www.fao.org/barra and are in Twitter, FAO Americas. Now, right now we have more than 500 members. We invite you to put your questions in the chat, saying who would like to ask the question to. So now you can also comment the events with the hashtag full implementation and also climate action. Right now, we're going to invite Mr. Raúl Artiga. He is a technical assistant for the Executive Secretariat of Environment and Development, SECAC. He will be showing us the advances in sectorial aspects and agriculture in the region, and also the system of integration in Latin America, SICA. Mr. Artiga, thank you very much. You have 7 minutes. Good morning. Hello, can you hear me well? Yes. I would like to share my screen so that I can give you a presentation. Well, I want to thank for the opportunity to present, and I would like to share with you the AFOLU 2040 initiative for Central America. There are 8 countries that integrate this, and from a focus of resiliency with for synergy between mitigation and adaptation, focusing on agriculture and silviculture and other uses of land. This initiative started in the climate action framework from the summit in 2019. This was based in a strategic view of the countries and the region, focusing on the need to develop joint efforts in environment and agriculture, always betting on this impact, positive impact in terms of resiliency and also benefit for mitigation of problems in the region. So AFOLU turned into intervention agent in synergy, working in synergy with the agricultural area to adapt to the environment and to adapt in restoring ecosystems and landscapes. So in these lines, this bet means that there's going to be a green and resilient economy, and this is related to work that has been being done in the environment in the 8 countries and the different agencies that are part of this integration system. In this line, well, the main objective is related to guaranteeing in the restoration of the ecosystem, this 10 million hectares of soils and degraded systems in sustainable aspect for 2030, and also advancing in the adaptation to a carbon neutral climate in silviculture and other uses of land from in 2040. And that's why the name AFOLU 2040.
Regarding the work strategies, first of all, we need to tackle a comprehensive landscape restoration strategy to preserve forest areas and also to enable biological corridors that are a feature of a region, and also to transform agricultural areas with more sustainable low carbon strategies. We have had participation in many international events. We are now preparing for the COP27, where we will have ministries and ministers of agriculture having side events where we will be presenting the progress that we have had, not only at the political level regarding interinstitutional agreements, but also in the practice with efforts that revolve around the 5 action lines that I will show now. First, preservation of forests and ecosystems. 2, preservation of the forests of the region. 3rd, the transformation of the production systems, shifting towards a more sustainable agriculture and livestock management. Fourth, the integration of sustainable practices and the promotion of techniques to guarantee food security. And fifth, to establish a monitoring and reporting system that would guarantee that we have evidence of the positive impact in terms of resilience and also reduction of emissions on the side of the agricultural and livestock sector. The initiative has been moving along from 2019 up to date with major efforts and the support and the contribution of FAO. And in this, we have identified a number of pilot projects that are going to set the guidelines for the development of the necessary actions in the territories that are in the countries represented. And that's all we wanted to share with you. We want to thank you so much for this instance. And ultimately, we need more platforms, and we want to thank FAO for the ability that they give us, for the support that they give us in terms of technical support, financial support, because it's thanks to that that we're able to conduct the work that we've been conducting. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Artiga. It's key that the work of the countries of SICA and the Council CAC, as well as the Central American Commission on Environment and Development, are conducting. And more specifically, thank you for the support and the efforts that the 8 countries are conducting in the framework of the initiative of AFOLO 2040. We are now reaching the instance for Q&As, and the objective is going to be to share ideas and concepts in terms of climate change and agriculture. And we would like to start the dialogue based on the presentations of our speakers. We will try to find out more about their experiences in order to engage in a dialogue regarding how to replicate those. In that sense, we will start with questions. And I will start with Mrs. Mena and Mrs. Ortiz. The question, Mrs. Mena, for you is, why would it be important from Placa's experience to engage in national and regional organization or articulation to strengthen climate action in agriculture, and what has been the experience like for the countries that are part of Placa? You have 2 minutes. Apparently, we are having a connection issue, and now I would like to move on to the following question for Mrs. Ortiz. In this case, a similar question. Why would it be important in your experience with ASLAC to engage in national and regional articulation with the different member countries to strengthen climate action in agriculture, and what has been the experience of the countries that are part of ASLA? The floor is yours. Thank you. Thank you for that question. There are several elements that I would like to highlight in terms of why it's important to engage in articulation among the countries that are part of ASLAC. And I believe that in the entire Latin American and Caribbean region, we share many issues in common in terms of the use of resources, and also in terms of our cultures and our societies and how they interact with the resources. More specifically, in the case of ASLAC, the soil. I was saying earlier that this requirement or this need for articulating different actions, different networks, different strategies, this isn't only something that should be happening at the level of soil, I mean with that resource. We should also acknowledge that we require the articulation of other elements. And I think that the role of ASLAC is very important because not only we are seeing this from the perspective of soil, but since soil is a resource that covers biodiversity and it has an impact over productive systems and food security, it also has to do with climate change. And we said it earlier when we talked about soil recarbonization. The soil is a key factor for adaptation to climate change. From this perspective, I think that the fact that we are able to engage, to organize among one another, identifying common challenges, and also learning from the different actions that are put in place by other stakeholders in the region, I think that's key in order to move forward with the objective of ASLAC, of the world or the global soil partnership as well, and also other framework agreements that are preserving the biological diversity, that are fighting climate change, and also that are fighting desertification. Thank you, Sol. Can you please briefly take a question that we received from the chat box? Very briefly, Sol, can you please explain what is this Doctor of the Soil program? Can you please share maybe a link or a website so that the person who is interested, in this case, Claudia Fortes, is able to find out more? I'm happy to do so. The link is in the Global Soil Partnership. Feel free to go to the homepage, and in the programs that are listed in the FAO website, we have specifically the programs of Doctors of the Soil. As I briefly said it in my presentation, what we are trying to do is to link the work of the partnership at the country and territory level, and also at the level of plot of land. It's fully cross-sectional, so in each country, the Alliance identifies one advocate of the program. In the case of Mexico, that would be the interdisciplinary program of soil studies, working hand in hand with the Ministry of Agriculture. So there is a process of certification, which is conducted by FAO. And in that, we identify trainers for the program, and the trainers identify different farmers that are leaders in the territories, that are champions, that are advocates, that would like to be a part of the program. They are trained, and the training is based on material that the FAO has worked on, posters that are available in several languages, in English and Spanish for our region specifically. And once the training takes place, the farmers take or obtain the certification, and since they are leaders, they're able to convey and disseminate the information among other farmers regarding soil, pH, sustainable management, biodiversity, what are the components of the soil, etc., etc. So very briefly, that is the program of Doctors of the Soil. Thank you so much for that, Sol. Dear Claudia, and to the 650 people that are now our audience today, we kindly invite you to reach out and contact us, and we're more than happy to send any questions or doubts or links where you can find out more and reach out to the different organizations. So please feel free to communicate with us. And now I'd like to ask a question to Carla Mena, and the question is why it is important from Placa's experience to engage in a national and regional articulation to strengthen climate change in agriculture, and what has been the experience like for the members of Placa. Carla, you have to. Can you hear me, everyone? Yes, loud and clear. Thank you so much for that question. Really, it has been quite a challenge to involve more countries in this initiative that has achieved to establish a hands-on community. In my presentation, I referred to this, and the purpose is precisely that our ministries and the countries that are part of Placa are able to work on the major challenge that we are facing, which is the use of technology, that in spite of all the obstacles, we have consolidated mechanisms to promote cooperation. So the agricultural ministries, when we started working with them, moving towards common goals that are priorities for the countries, we realized that there were very important and valuable actions that could be exchanges or based on the exchange of lessons learned among the countries. For us, it was key to be able to engage in a partnership with all the countries and, of course, to continue to involve more countries in the working groups. One of the major challenges and the major value that I would say the platform has are the technical working groups that have the involvement of technical people promoting from their ministries different actions and solutions to the challenges that we face. That has been key for the objective of Placa to be achieved. And of course, we want to continue to grow. We want our technical people in the region to be trained. We want to exchange knowledge. We want to promote synergy to face the challenges that our governments are facing. And we want our ministries and the authorities to be empathic and to count on Placa as that mechanism. To count on Placa as the mechanism to join us as a region. Thank you so much, Carla, for that. Now we have a question from Mr. Julian Baez. In your opinion, from the experience of your organization, which have been the greatest difficulties that you have found that have prevented you to engage in intersector and interagency articulation, and what lessons can you learn based on that experience? Thank you so much for that question. To be very honest, I would say that we've not had any severe difficulties. It's been quite the opposite. We have had good collaboration with other agencies in the UN system and also with the different countries when it comes to articulating the data specifically to report. Maybe one difficulty that I would mention, which has been severe, is the standardization of how to present data. Since this is sensitive information that is useful for the decision making, in that sense, not all the agencies are standardized or following a common standard when it comes to how they present the information. For instance, in the case of forest fires, or in the case of the impacts. That is a point where I think there's still room to grow in terms of improving the articulation among the agencies to report based on specific standards. More specifically, when we talk about the impacts of extreme events in the countries and how to report on those in a way that is comparable. That would be my comment. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And in the case of SECAP, Mr. Artiga, what could you share regarding the greatest difficulties that you have found in the region for the sectorial and interagency articulation in the territory, and what lessons could you learn? Yes, thank you. I think I'm having connection issues. Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Yes, thank you. Well, the main difficulties have to do with those interinstitutional arrangements that are necessary to be put in place in the territories. Once a political decision has been made and it has been ratified. However, when we think about the interaction between environment and agriculture in the territory, these are interactions that sometimes overlap, and in some cases, there is tension between understanding the concept of the intervention that is required for the transformation to shift towards better practices associated to climate resilience and the interactions that the ministries of environment have been promoting to promote the restoration of ecosystems from a novelty practice which somehow challenges traditional agricultural practices. Maybe this would be the the more complicated situation. Therefore, it is an ongoing process that requires plenty of dialogue, and it requires the definition of work methodologies and the articulation of technical and territorial spaces with the productive sectors. I think those are the lessons learned, and they have to do with understanding the pace of action of each public entity regarding their own agendas in terms of their skills and levels of authority and scopes of action. And we also need to understand that we have to be very, very respectful of the time and institutional processes that each country has, considering its capabilities and specificities in relation to this initiative. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Artiga. As of right now, we would like to ask a couple of general questions in order to have your answers as members of the panel. And as a conclusion of the dialogue, it would be very important for us to summarize the importance of the intersector articulation between environment and agriculture to strengthen regional climate action without losing sight of the specificities of each country and their own needs and priorities. And in your experience, in each of your lines of work, which would be the 3 recommendations based on your experience that would be key in order to achieve intersector articulation in the countries of the region? Please, any one of the speakers may start with 3 recommendations. Thank you. Well, if you allow me, I would say that the first recommendation is to guarantee that everyone has a common, clear, conceptual framework regarding the interaction and the agenda of joint work that the partnership requires to take action regarding climate change in the territories. I think that is key to acknowledge the need for having a common conceptual framework on which to base the actions in the both sectors. Secondly, we need to acknowledge the specificities and the nature of each entity, and also making a difference between guiding entities and executing entities, because maybe there are differences in resources and capabilities. I would say that that is another key factor to consider. And finally, how important it is to translate this into a fiscal budget that is based on performance-based management, because at the end of the day, we are going to joint efforts that we're going to have to allocate resources for. That is all. Thank you. Thank you. Very good recommendations. Definitely useful and thoughtful. Carla, I see that your hand is up. Thank you. And that is a question that's very valuable, because from the experience of Placa, furthermore, from the different member countries, there are 3 key points that we have seen that are key in order to join these 2 sectors. First, the governance that we have in our countries towards the agricultural sector, for instance, an agricultural environment agenda that coordinates and that guides the journey at the country level towards a more sustainable production, towards a production which is environmentally friendly, towards having ecosystemic services that needs to be promoted. So we need to have an integrated agenda from the ministries of agriculture and livestock. And we have seen in the case of Costa Rica, for instance, the development of that experience, and it has added value from the investment beyond a single entity, but rather a number of ecosystemic services in a national system by which we are defending the DNA of our sector in the face of global markets that are demanding an agricultural sector that's sustainable, but also hand in hand with an agricultural and environmental agenda. Secondly, public policy, of course, in order to put in place actions and good practices and public policies, they should be guided towards the fulfillment of the objectives of an agenda, for instance. And lastly, last but not least, our Latin American region and the Caribbean have different levels of agricultural activity, and that makes governance, public policies reach the fields, the sites, and actually take place in the plots of land of our farmers in the different sectors in our country where our people need to have the skills, the technology. They need to be able to put in place projects, not only at the political level, but also from the private sector and together with the academia. The integration of the three dimensions, hand in hand with environment, the ministries of agriculture, fishing, and forestry, that's key in our regions in order to put in place changes, transformations, and to move towards a sustainable agriculture and to shift to an agenda that's more comprehensive and balanced out, ranging to the territory where things actually happen.
Thank you very much, Carla, for your recommendations. Is there anything else you would like to say, Sol? Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity. I have three concrete recommendations. I think that it is very good to have a legal framework that will talk about this recommendation in terms of mandates, because that way the different agencies are going to have the need, not just in actions that are required for this type of interaction, but also with the need and the obligation in terms of the national regulation. And in this case, I would like to emphasize that this interaction to attend things related to climate, to biodiversity, and to big challenges that we have, we should not just focus on the productive and environmental area. We should also address other areas because there are interrelations amongst all of us. What happens in one place in the energy sector impacts a lot on other sectors. So I would broaden this and try to look the link in different aspects. So we should not include just two sectors, but all of the sectors that have competence in these aspects. This has worked in Mexico. The other thing is having very clear mechanisms for follow-up for agreements, actions, and plans that we have, so that we can have certainty that we are advancing and we are able to see with clear indications, not just with action, but also indicators of impact. So how we are impacting on the well-being of populations, on reducing emissions, etc. And also the establishment of priorities at a country level to be done with these mechanisms of interaction amongst the different sectors. Thank you. Thank you very much, Sol, for those recommendations that are very relevant. Julian, would you like to say something? Yeah, apart from everything that has been mentioned in terms of governance, which is fundamental, I would say that a substantial recommendation is to have standards when we make the observations. We're talking about impacts and about how to interrelate these different sectors. So I think that the data, the information is absolutely fundamental. It is necessary to strengthen this aspect, its registries, and how both sectors interact based on information that is based, of course, on science and observations that are standardized. So I would recommend that. Thank you. Thank you very much, Julian. Carla, because of time, I don't know if it's going to be possible to respond, but I would like to tell you that there are two questions for Blanca. Maybe for Placa, maybe we could talk about that later on. But just for you to know, there's a question from Guillermo Rubio, and it's how can we generate a dialogue between knowledge, traditional knowledge, science, technology, and public policy from Placa, I don't know if you would like to comment on something of that. And the other question is if there are recommendations or studies about the impacts in the design of public policies that are derived from the work of Placa and also from the work of ASLAC. I don't know if you could briefly say something. Yes, very briefly, and thank you very much for the question because it's very valuable. And the question, the answer is oriented to both of them. The truth is that we can focalize our groups, our work groups, technical work groups. They're very important to link all of these actions and all of these aspects with different tasks and with different activities that we carry out through workshops, through courses. We can include these topics that are mentioned. And in public policies, we have a work group of public policy that is going to try to implement not only development of capacities, but also developing projects that we can use to have this synergy. Up to now, we have been working on a proposal towards development, regional development, that is related to what you are saying, which is vital. And well, I would really like to deep down in this topic. I would like to have your contact and to be able to share this information through email so that you know how we can integrate these different topics in the Placa system and how we can tomorrow evaluate or maybe develop these regional systems. What we want to do is to look for that impact in our production. These are key topics, and I invite you to have these topics. Thank you very much. Thank you for your answer, Carla. Well, we are getting to the end of our dialogue. It has been very good, very important. And in that sense, we want to thank the Minister of the Environment from Chile, and also all of the different panelists that have been part of this dialogue for their interventions, and mainly for the recommendations that we are sure that you have been given us, that have given us a very good idea to elaborate a roadmap to work from our common goals without losing sight of the more specific aspects, without leaving behind the holistic aspect. The work that you have been doing is very useful for sustainable agriculture work, and with what we are going to be doing in November 6th in the COP27 in Egypt. We want to highlight that in this event, we have been proposing and disseminating common solutions to deal with the challenges of climate change and the impacts about the ecosystems and the food systems of our region. We are closing this event, but we want to thank all of the participants, more than 650 people that have participated today, that have been listening to this dialogue. And I also thank, before saying goodbye, the organizing team and everyone that has participated in this dialogue. We wish you a very good day. And also we wish that this space has been useful for you in terms of the dialogue and the information, and also for the exchange of experiences and future work in common in favor of the governance and climate action. So we really hope that you have a great day.